Hello, I'm Toby Haydock. I like Doctor Who and ice cream. I can't give you any ice cream, but I've got bucket loads of Doctor Who, and I'm about to watch a story that's been chosen for me by a friend who has also picked their favourite things about this particular adventure, and I have to try to guess what they are. So why don't you join me? You can watch along if you like, or just listen as I chat to you, offer facts, opinions, some facts that turn out to actually just be opinions, and observations, but mainly try to get us to those special places that Doctor Who takes us to. The happy times and places. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Haydock. So who's our special guest this time around? Let's get them to introduce themselves.
Hi Toby, it's Simon Guerrier here. I am one of those writers, I write for Big Finish and BBC Books and for Doctor Who magazine and stuff. I've chosen for you The Evil of the Daleks from 1967, in which the Daleks' diabolical plot involves them running an antique shop.
Well, hello. Night has drawn in, and it's time for a classic, a spooky classic. The first missing episode I've done. So without further ado, in whatever form you're going to watch it, or if you're not, hello, I'll try to explain the pictures as best I can. It's Evil of the Daleks, Episode 1. Press play now. Well, how exciting and also terrifying. I mean, I'm quite excited now because Evil of the Daleks is a bona fide classic. It's also 7 episodes long and mostly missing. So how enthusiastic am I going to remain tonight? The Evil of the Daleks. I often write just Evil of the Daleks, but it is The Evil of the Daleks. I'm not great on exactness of things like that. The Evil of the Daleks. I know it's Horror of Fang Rock, isn't it? It's not The Horror of Fang Rock. A shot of some stock footage of Gatwick. And then, of course, the TARDIS is being taken away. So this connects with the end of the Faceless Ones. But, of course, because of the way production was done then, this isn't Gatwick. Of course, in the old days, I like these pictures of Troughton and Jamie, which I saw quite late in the day. Are they from the designer? Wherever they're from, they weren't in the usual run of pictures printed for Evil, which were largely Victoria in her dress and Maxtable and Waterfield in the lab, and the fighting the fighting Daleks and the Emperor Dalek. But so that wasn't filmed at Gatwick because it was part of this production block. But of course, if that was done now, you'd get whichever unit was on the previous story and go, right, we've got a couple of scenes at the beginning. We'll capture those for the next show. But no. Having just been at Gatwick Airport not that long previously, you then have to do it. I think it was somewhere near the BBC, wasn't it? Some hangars. Now then, Bob Hall is played by Alec Ross, who is only in this episode of Doctor Who. It's his only... But he was married at the time to somebody who would go on to be in Doctor Who. He was married to Sheila Hancock. So Bob Hall was married to Helen A. But sadly, Alec Ross died not long after this. He died in 71, 72 of esophageal cancer, which has a rather sad symmetry for Sheila Hancock because it's also what John Thaw died of. I'm not too maudlin, am I? Why do I know this stuff? Why do I know the personal tragedies of actors? It's because the actors always spoke to me. I think it's, middle of nowhere. The idea that you could be, a name on a cast list, and you could spend your time pretending to be other people. Very appealing, and I imagine that sort of exciting life. And so reading about Evil of the Daleks when I was younger, the headline news is, of course, Victoria's first story, but mostly, the black and white Daleks fighting at the end. So not much heed was given to episode 1, which is very much a setup, isn't it? Because it all takes place in the present day. Well, no. It all takes place a year in the past, because it's set on the same day, or, 20th of July 1966? Don't write in. I think you're all fines. This is all guesswork. 20th of July 66, which is the day Some of the War Machines takes place on, which is also the day the end of the Faceless Ones takes place on, which is what gives Ben and Polly their excuse to leave rather unceremoniously last week. John Bailey, wonderful actor. He has a very broken quality, doesn't he? And was a broken man the last time he was in Doctor Who, because he's the commander in episode 6 of The Censorites, the sort of Ben Gunn character, the guy who's still fighting the war in episode 6 of The Censorites. And that character too has a sort of broken dignity about him that Waterfield also has. There's a real sort of sadness behind the eyes and a slight reediness in the voice that suggests melancholia to me. It's a nice mystery, isn't it? This although Mr. Perry is also not massively modern, it's the nice mystery of Waterfield with his century-old way of conducting himself, but Mr. Perry with his what are they called? You know what I mean? Buttonhole and manner is also a bit of a sort of relic. But I'm from a time when I'm as old as Waterfield. I am from a time when this story was completely missing. And the idea that an episode of this would come back, it was, oh God, horrible reading this. When you first got the idea that Doctor Who had missing episodes, they went, I wonder which ones are missing. Oh, what? Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks and the Web of Fear and the Dalek Master Plan. Oh, come on. So, of course, they were the most missed. But then as you get older, and I think one likes the idea of being away from the crowd, and everyone else goes, I love Power and Evil. And you go, yeah, everyone loves the Dalek stories. I'm more interested in the esoteric strangeness of the Macra Terror. It's the sort of mental games you play with yourself. And I think as I got to know Evil, so I'm interested to see what happens later on, is that the middle episodes seem like quite a long fight between Jamie and Kemmel. And on the soundtrack, you don't know what's going on. So I always see those as a bit of a lull. And of course, the early setup is quite Dalek-light. So I think I went through a phase of thinking of this as a story that only really kicks in once the Daleks start playing trains and being a bit weird. And then the Civil War on Skaro, which is the headline. And I think when you discover a story like Evil of the Daleks, having seen all those pictures, you assume it's just 7 episodes of sort of wall-to-wall Dalek fighting, and then you go, that doesn't actually happen till the end. Why didn't they just do that more? But it's interesting because when you go to, well, we'll see at the end. Let's talk about the beginning. So Alec Ross is also the father of the actress Abigail, or I think Melanie Thor, who was adopted by John Thor when Sheila Hancock married John Thor. So she is the sister of Abigail, Thor, but actually they have different fathers. And this is Griffith Davis as Kennedy, who is still about, I think. I've never had contact with him, but I think a friend of mine has had a signed picture. He's got that sort of spivvy quality about him. In fact, I say spiv. I think they offered the part to James Beck, who was the spiv Walker in Dad's Army. And that spivvy sort of modern sort of thuggery is quite... You don't see many characters like that in 60s Doctor Who, or you don't think you do, and I don't think of you doing so. And it gives it a sort of... It gives us a modernity and a sort of realism, although he's a sort of type, but because he's not space age or historical, and those are the sort of two... At this stage, in 60s, black and white Doctor Who, the idea of Doctor Who in the modern day is unusual. Well, hang on, let's think about it. The War Machines is the first in the modern day. Then Faceless Ones, although, yes, all right, a year in the past. And then this. So this is only the 11th episode of Doctor Who. Oh, there's a bit in the chase, I know. I think you'll find, and Planet of Giants, but the headline news there is the fact that everybody's shrunk. Okay, but in terms of so I think give me a pass on Planet of Giants. But see, it's Planet of Giants. It's not Planet of the Giants. I like. It's interesting. This is very much set up. But what's really interesting about this is the way that Whittaker sort of writes the Doctor piecing the clues together. This is a whole episode of the Doctor trying to find out what's happened to his TARDIS. And you sort of plot-wise, you can sort of dispense with it. But we have a mystery. And as the Doctor begins to solve the mystery, we don't know this yet, but he's walking into a trap. So, and that's actually, I think, a really interesting dynamic, because in a way, the Daleks are harnessing the fact that he's going to go Kennedy, he's going to follow the matches to the tricolor. The fact that he's intelligent and smart and will work stuff out actually leads him into a trap. So he is hoist by his own petard. He is trapped by the fact that he's capable of solving the mystery. Yeah, he's very urgent, isn't he? And very sort of, yeah. I like what he brings to it because Mr. Perry is so posh and Mr. Waterfield is, obviously he has this oldie worldy thing about him because, oh, hang on, he's from the past. And it is a story that sort of moves from place to place. It's not a static tale at all. But yeah, another handsome. That's nice. And this is what, the first 7-parter since Marco Polo. Gosh. So you can afford this episode of sort of creeping mystery. We're sort of in the dark, but also crucially, the Doctor is in the dark. But yeah, this was. I've got to work out what Simon Guerrier might like about this, and he's a writer, so I suspect I don't think he'll be picking any of the performances. I certainly again, this is an episode I would have sort of dismissed when I was just, because I don't have the soundtrack to this anymore. I'm watching a reconstruction. I did have the BBC Audio CD narrated soundtrack, and I lent it to somebody, and they've not given it me back. I was sorting through all of my stuff. I've got a few gaps in my collection that you go, well, where's that gone over the years? And I tend to think of myself as guarding my Doctor Who material like a hawk. But these recons, which are from a lovely bunch of people called Loose Cannon, I ended up on my own, having ended a relationship. It was ended for me. I never ended them myself. And I was at a bit of a loose end and rattling about on my own, and I discovered these recons, and so I sent off for them, and it was great because I made my own CD covers too. I didn't do all the artwork. There's places you could get it online, but to match the DVD covers, and I bought DVD boxes to make so that they all matched on the shelf, and that was sort of quite a nice project. It's great how we can be creative, and also there's something about the archaeology of filling the gaps of Doctor Who, and in fact I'd counter that's as much of the fun of Doctor Who as the stories is all of the actual experience of discovering it, or in this case filling the gaps. And I had quite a right old time getting the recons, and they have a few extra bits and interviews with them, but it's fine. You can sit down and watch an approximation of Evil of the Daleks. It's amazing, really, that the amount of effort that's gone into recreating something that was shown, just a couple of times. And I started filling my gaps on my shelf and making the covers, and because I was now single, and then I met somebody else and sort of stopped. So I've still got some gaps. Really, I need to become appalling to live with and be left on my own again in order to complete the few little gaps on my shelf. Although the animations are now making good. That isn't it extraordinary? I mean, the idea that I first experienced the whole of Evil of the Daleks with a cassette tape that sounded like it had been recorded underwater in a sock. Actually, the quality of Evil wasn't too bad. And my goodness, huddled in my bedroom with a tape recorder, listening, this was better quality than a lot. I mean, Fury from the Deep, what you thought was the heartbeat going all the way through, was just the tape going. But I like that, and I would counter that, I'm not countering anything. I would contend that the fact that lots of this Doctor Who is missing actually makes Doctor Who more interesting, which is an awful thing to say, but that great feeling of loss, one, it spurned this sort of creativity, but also the fact that we covet something that we haven't got. It's what archaeology is about, isn't it? And so then picks up, there were no telesnaps when I was younger, so a lot of these photos there was no access to. I remember when I first saw a telesnap of Power of the Daleks at the back end of a book called Doctor Who: The Early Years, suddenly like, what, pictures taken off the screen? And then suddenly, there's pictures taken off the screen of loads of Doctor Who episodes. And then it's like, wow, we've got telesnaps for everything. Oh, except season 3. Oh, so now season 3 has a special thing because we don't have telesnaps for it, whereas we do have telesnaps for the other thing. And then a sensor clip comes back here, and then and that sort of gradual rebuilding. But I think the fact missing episodes fascinate me. I think because we imagine them, we piece them together. People do this clever stuff. We have to work things out. I mean, I know that with some of these recons, they even use, get screen grabs of the extras. And I mean the extras, the background artists from other things, and put them on to get them as accurate as possible. Now, the Tricolor Coffee Bar. Now, this is interesting again because you've got music. I remember there being a big worry that should there ever be a commercial release of Evil of the Daleks, the missing thing. But we're still worried about those things. Because there's modern music, isn't there? There's paperback writing, which isn't this. I can't really hear it. But because it had Beatles music, and Beatles music was, a definite no-no. It would be too expensive to license. It was kind of, well, if this... Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, because did Jamie just ask about, is it the chameleons? And then the music fades, and that I love the music in this. The music feels like it's on the way to an epic as well. Oh, and that, isn't it? That this Dalek theme, but that sort of fluting underplay as well. It's like Dudley Simpson has got a memo to say this story is really important and we're building up to something. Because this is, as I say, this is an episode of investigation, but it has a real atmosphere about it, and it has a sense of build, which I know in this modern age, and I'm not saying I'm immune to this. We're itching for the story to begin. We're itching for the Daleks to be in it. But of Doctor Who fans of old, even if Daleks are in the title, they don't appear to the end of episode 1. That's just going to happen. Yeah. Paperback writer. But of course, and I just assumed, they've gone for modern music, but it was years later that, of course, again, because it's the 20th of July 1966, no, it's music from a year ago. Which, again, would mean something slightly different to an audience at the time than it does to us, because 66, 67 to us, it's the past. Coffee bar's a funny thing. Has he got one of those see-through cups? Yeah, I remember those see-through coffee cups. Oh God, I mean, how space age is that? They look terribly dated now. I think that's what one is. It doesn't matter to make the point, because I'm sure we had some of those kicking about, because our house was full of old. We couldn't afford anything new. Our house was full of old stuff. Yeah, see-through coffee cups. They seem so exciting. I was going to say the idea that you'd go for a coffee now. People spend a fortune on coffee. I'm not much of a coffee drinker, but I sometimes think of a coffee bar as there's a bit in Quatermass 2 where Quatermass meets somebody at a coffee bar, and the waitress bemoans the fact that people are all going to tea bars these days. Fashion, she says. That's all it is. Fashion. It's one of those scenes that they're clear to give an actor time to get from one set to the other. This is rather put upon waitress. So yeah, coffee bars. They're very. I was going to say that one. I've just made my point. Because, I mean, gosh, Quatermass 2 is 12 years before this. Isn't that extraordinary? That, again, sort of, black and white sci-fi all sort of rolls into one. But that's 12 years. That's Unearthly Child to Genesis of the Daleks. Polo neck jumper. Doesn't Jamie wear one of those later? Was the costume budget quite small? Yes, when Kennedy's out, give Jamie his jumper. It's only just occurred to me that the time difference between Quatermass 2 and this. That's extraordinary. And we still haven't seen the Daleks, but. And he's been quite a key character, but he's actually here just pretty much now to make this discovery, as we'll discover. He's not going to be along for this. I did like that bit in the coffee bar when the music went down and the Doctor went, "Oh, it's something much more serious." I only bring that up again because I don't think I gave it enough attention. Yeah, and so it's not just the Doctor who's investigating. Kennedy is curious, so in a way, the audience are going, okay. Even the baddie doesn't quite know exactly what's going on, but of course he's got a perfectly plausible motive. He's a crook, isn't he? So I think he's gonna, and of course, this is going to start moving in a minute because the end of episode 1 and the beginning of episode 2 are the same. I don't know if it was restaged or not. So actually what happened in episode 1 might have been marginally different. But of course this was the first bit I ever saw of Evil of the Daleks because I'd seen the Wheel in Space episode 6, which has the clip of Kennedy and the Dalek. Amazing in those days that you'd watch another episode, and part of the fun of watching it is because it had got a clip of a missing episode in it. And then, of course, an episode turns up that is annoyingly, it's the one that's got the missing clip in it. And here it is. I love that music. It's real, and that's great. It's great. And it is a sort of deadly version of the Doctor Who theme, isn't it? A really sort of, and that's great because the Dalek's reflected in the thing, and then you've got the shot through the safe. That's a great piece of music. Yep, we're on our way to an epic. And there we go. Yes, and for years I wasn't sure if... Because I think some sources, would say, and then Kennedy is exterminated. I was never sure if Kennedy dying was the end of the episode, but it's not. It's seeing the Dalek. Who's voiced by Roy Skelton for the first time. Which is odd, because Peter Hawkins is also on board, and he was your main Dalek man. But the sole Dalek here is Roy Skelton. Now, well, I enjoyed that. I hope you did too. I mean, the sort of episode I would usually sort of dismiss and, pay lip service to because it's a setup, isn't it? But actually, I think what I'm going to choose about is I very much liked the conceit of the Doctor solving a series of puzzles. It's very Doctorish. It's interesting that we've gone back to the show's original script editor. The Doctor is sort of detective, smart, otherworldly detective. But I also like the fact that all that problem solving is doing is leading him further into the web that is to enmesh him. So the Doctor's detective work and the dramatic irony therein. God. What has Simon Guerrier chosen? He's a very clever fellow, so I'm sure he's chosen something better than me.
My best thing about episode 1 of The Evil of the Daleks is that even though this is one of the 97 missing episodes of Doctor Who, I think that both the beginning and the end still exist. Well, maybe. The ending certainly does. It's repeated at the start of episode 2 and also features in the Wheel of Space episode 6, both of which exist. But according to the camera script, the opening shot of Evil of the Daleks episode 1 is stock footage of Gatwick Airport, and surely they used material shot on location at Gatwick for the Faceless Ones, episode 1 of which exists. So maybe they used some of that, but we don't know. We don't know! Anyway, that's my best thing about episode 1, or at least the thing that keeps me awake at night.
Well, that's a great point. Oh, I see he's going to be clever, isn't he, Simon? Because that's not a thing. That's a sort of thing. I have asked people to choose their favourite thing, and a couple of people have said, can you clarify what you mean by a thing? And it's like, well, what you think by a thing. And that's definitely a thing, if not a thing. That's a great call, yes. And I sort of did talk about that, didn't I? I actually think Charles Norton very recently, when we were working on the Faceless Ones DVD, the animation, he sourced all of the footage, and much of the aeroplane footage, if not all, was not shot by the Doctor Who production team for Faceless Ones. They were given stock footage, or they got stock footage, some of which was colour, and still is colour. So it's highly likely that the opening shot of Evil of the Daleks exists. A shot was used at the beginning of this recon. It was moving, and there's no reason to assume that they got it wrong, and that it's yes. So I like that. The beginning and the end of Evil of the Daleks episode 1 is what I was talking about the archaeology. I mean, I thought I'd talk about it because I thought it was interesting. I didn't think to identify it as the fab thing about episode 1, but it is a fab thing about episode 1. That presumably one day we'll be able to piece all of the missing episodes of Doctor Who together by the little bits of them that we find in little corners of the world. Well, look, I've got a feeling we're on our way to an epic. So I'm going to get myself a cup of tea, because I'm not a coffee person. Drink coffee. It only leads to trouble. I'll see you for episode 2, which, excitingly, not just the beginning and the end of it exist, the whole blooming lot. Can't wait. See you next time. Thanks for viewing/listening. Ta-ta. Evil of the Daleks is available from the BBC as a narrated soundtrack. Episode 2 is available on DVD as part of the Lost in Time collection. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Haydock. My special guest was writer Simon Guerrier, whose witty and inventive work can be purchased from Big Finish and BBC Books, amongst others, and his stuff is definitely worth your time. He's a funny man with a generosity of spirit and a gift for the offbeat. You can hear what I make of the following episode of Evil of the Daleks next time. The music was by Dave Gates. Special thanks go to Chris Boyle, and the podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson. Please go to www.tobyhaydock.com for more, and don't forget to rate, thumbs up, and generally be nice about this podcast everywhere you possibly can. It's easy for you, and it helps me, and I'll be very grateful. You can support these podcasts and any other of my broadcasting endeavours at patreon.com/Toby Haydock and kofi.com/Toby Haydock. Patrons get special goodies and advance releases, and of course, my eternal gratitude. With sincere thanks to my patrons, John Deere, Ian Key, Jenny at Blue Box 99, Richard Byatt, Paul Carrington, James Gould, Joe Llewellyn, Nathan Moore, Nick Temple, Apollo C. Vermouth, James Blackett, Michael Dennis, Tim Dickinson, Pete Dillon Trenchard, Simon Guerrier, Christopher Joyce, Andy Kitching, Pip Madeley, Russell Parker, Monsieur Poirot, Stephen Shapansky, Paul Shields, David Spencer, Sidney Trout, Alistair Wallace, John Williams, Peter Adamson, Peter Crocker, Pascal Zierker, Sidney Wilson. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Toby Haydock YouTube channel.